Thanks for staying with us on Point. Now, pharmaceutical manufacturers globally are not allowing private players to procure vaccines directly, and they prefer to rather deal with governments. Discovery has announced that it is set to vaccinate its members. Ryan Noach, who's the CEO of Discovery Health, joins me now. Thanks so much for your time on SABC News this afternoon. So Discovery plans to vaccinate around 3 million of its members, but this is largely dependent on government procuring the right amount of vaccines.
That's right. Thanks very much for having me on your show. It's entirely dependent on us getting adequate supply. We're confident we will get supply. The government has completed an excellent procurement initiative to secure sufficient vaccine to achieve that population level of immunity that we require. And so we will depend on supply from the government to the private sector. We want to be up and ready to go and in a position to vaccinate our members as quickly as possible.
So how are you working with government to coordinate that rollout or ensure that that happens?
Well, we've been working closely with government throughout the procurement effort. Our conversations with the manufacturers have revealed very clearly that they're only prepared to engage with governments in the countries that they're selling vaccines. And so we've worked very closely with the government and supported their efforts to conclude the procurement deals. We're waiting now for clarity on how the vaccines will be allocated to the private sector. That clarity has not yet been received. But in the Cabinet statement, it's very clearly articulated that the private sector will be included in the distribution and administration of vaccines from May. And so we will be ready from 1 May to vaccinate our members as long as we get supply.
Talk to us about that vaccination rollout. How are you planning to do that?
There will be 2 main channels through which we'll offer the vaccinations to our members. The first is existing medicine supply chains in the private healthcare sector, which are actually highly efficient and effective and accessible. And so we'll use those existing medicine supply chains like retail pharmacies and other healthcare workers for the one channel. And the second is in recognizing the importance of speed with maximum reach of the vaccination campaign. We've made a large investment in both people and facilities to set up about 20 or more mass vaccination sites where we'll do large numbers of vaccination on a daily basis.
Okay, how much are you spending in terms of cash and deploying of human capital on this?
We're hiring about 250 people just for this mass vaccination exercise, and we're pleased to be contributing to employment in that regard. We haven't released publicly the quantum of our spend, though it is significant, and including the vaccines themselves, medical schemes in total across the industry will be spending about 1.5 billion rand as an estimate, depending on the final landed price of the vaccines from the procurement deals.
Mm-hmm. Let's go back to that vaccination plan. We know that there are some members who perhaps have underlying conditions. They'll obviously be the ones to first get the vaccine. And then how are you going to do the phase 2 and phase 3 of that vaccine rollout as Discovery?
Now, our responsibility is to stick strictly to the prioritization guidelines that the Ministerial Advisory Committee on COVID-19 vaccination have provided. They've divided the vaccination effort up into 3 phases. The first phase is for healthcare workers, and according to the Cabinet statement, that should be completed by the end of April. The second phase is for the elderly and people living with chronic illnesses, and they are the most at risk, and we've already identified who those members are within our member base. We have about 550,000 of those members within our Discovery-administered member base. And we want to get the vaccines to them first as a priority. Included also in the government's phase 2 plan are certain essential workers and occupational groups that government has identified as critical to sustaining the economy.
So, Ryan, we know that you are dependent on what government does, and you've also said you've worked very closely with them when it comes to planning your vaccination rollout. Have you considered the possibility of some of the challenges that have been faced already and your plan B if there are hurdles met in terms of procuring the vaccines that you need as Discovery?
Yeah, certainly. We think about that a lot, and we're anxious about that, of course. We've, through Business for South Africa, been quite close to the negotiations for those vaccinations, which have been led by the Department of Health and the Minister of Health. And we're confident that they will result in vaccine deliveries. They are imminently completed, and the South African Health Products Regulation Authority has already given emergency authorization for the Section 21 administration of 20 million Pfizer doses, and we're hoping that the Johnson & Johnson approval comes through very soon. So we're confident that these procurement deals will materialize.
Ryan Noach, CEO of Discovery Health, thanks so much for your time on SABC News this afternoon.
Thank you for having me.